All right, joined now by Austin Price from VolQuest.com. Really appreciate him taking some of his time, his valuable time out of his day to come chat with us about Jeremy Pruitt and the Vols. Austin does a great job covering football and recruiting at VolQuest.com on the Rivals Network. Austin, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Everything's good, man. Good. Ready for some football, week one. Really,
aren't we all?
Yeah, we are. And a really important matchup, week one. You know, going into this game, you know, Wes and I talked a lot preseason and sort of looking at the schedule when it was still 12 games and saying, you know, that Tennessee game is one that we had circled as being maybe the most important of the year for a lot of reasons. Recruiting, on field, you know, SEC East sort of pecking order, trying to catch up to the Georgia and the Floridas of the world. That's sort of how we view it. Is that how you view it? Is that how it's viewed in Tennessee right now, or what's the feel over there going into this first game?
Well, I think for Tennessee fans, you know, traditionally, obviously, they know that, you know, they're more of a historic program than South Carolina. But in the last 10 years, South Carolina has gotten the best of Tennessee on a good portion of the, you know, of the, you know, the times they played. So I think, you know, to get Tennessee back to where Jeremy Pruitt's trying to get them to, you know, winning the games like Missouri and Vanderbilt and South Carolina last year were huge, just for kind of turning the corner in one realm. Now I think to do this, you know, back-to-back years and kind of get some momentum in those games that Tennessee had struggled to win the last, you know, 7 or 8 years, I think that's big. So I think, you know, right out of the gate to have this game on the docket, you know, I think for both schools it's a huge game. And realistically, I think the loser is going to have a tough time, I won't say recovering from it, but having the year they're wanting to have. I just think when you lose this game, because it's a real coin flip type of game, you know, I think that it puts the loser behind the 8 ball, because South Carolina's schedule is really tough to start. Tennessee has Missouri second, but then, you know, we'll play a 3-game stretch of Georgia, a Kentucky team that has high hopes, and then Alabama to close out the first half of the schedule. So, you know, I think both teams need a win, and both teams need to avoid a loss. And sadly, that's not possible.
Right. So stylistically, you know, these teams, there's obviously a lot of staff familiarity, right? With some guys that have, you know, worked together in the past. Mike Bobo, Jeremy Pruitt, Will Friend, Tracy Rocker. There's a lot of carryover. There's a lot of familiarity. And stylistically, these teams, you know, whether it's defensively or offensively, may do some things the same. But here's one thing I wanted to ask you about going to the Vols offense, Austin, is that, you know, this is a team where, let's be honest, the difference in that game last year for the most part was Marquez Callaway and Juwan Jennings, what Jim Chaney did from a schematic standpoint to protect, but those two guys just won one-on-ones. They're not on the roster anymore. Tennessee's got a good O-line, good running backs, experience at quarterback. You know, what are the skill positions look like at Tennessee in terms of pass catchers? How are they coping with losing those two guys?
Well, Josh Palmer ascends into the number 1 role. And then, you know, and so the big question all offseason is, and I always equate it back to, you know, it's easy to be Robin. It's not always easy to be Batman. And so can he be Batman? And, you know, I'm not sure. We won't know until, you know, Saturday night. And really, I don't even know if we'll know fully Saturday night, you know, no matter what happens, just because it's only one game. So, you know, in my estimation, you know, the skill positions have a lot of promise. They just have a lot of inexperience. You know, Tennessee's freshman wide receivers, led by a guy that you guys may know very well, and that should be Jalen Hyatt. He and Malachi Weidman have had really good fall camps. Ramel Keaton's been solid, who is a true sophomore. Tennessee's had a guy like Cedric Tillman, who's kind of, you know, burst onto the scene. You know, I joke that it's because he went from number 85 to number 4, and he just got a much better number. Nobody wears 85 anymore. This isn't 1987. But, you know, Tennessee's skill positions have promise, a lot of high hopes, but they're unproven. So you're not going to know until you get there Saturday night. And you're right. You know, Marquez won some one-on-one battles. Juwan one-on-one battles, but then Juwan also just, you know, was a competitor and would not be denied. I mean, South Carolina had him wrapped up a few times and just couldn't tackle him, as most of the SEC could.
Austin, appreciate you joining us, man. You know, I think obviously for everybody covering a team right now, COVID and contact tracing are some words that we've had to write probably a lot more than we wish. But certainly at Tennessee, I guess you go back, I don't know if that was 2-3 weeks ago when, you had to cancel the scrimmage over there. I don't know how much information y'all are getting or other schools are even giving out about that specifically, but how much of a issue or how much of a storyline is contact tracing still for Tennessee this week as we close in on the game, as far as we know, or have most of those guys, from what y'all have heard, been able to return to action, return to practice?
Well, it was a big deal last week. 2 weeks ago, it was an even bigger deal. It's gotten less and less.
Mm-hmm.
The latest rounds of tests, to my knowledge, Tennessee had no positives. And I think everybody's back. No one is out due to contact tracing. If you're out this week, it's because you turned an ankle, or you've got a poor hamstring, or you got back problems, whatever. Normal football injuries. No one's out due to contact tracing or COVID, which is nice. Obviously, I think all schools are going to use this. If they lose, well, we weren't ready because, so-and-so had to miss out on, a number of weeks. I mean, like Wanye Morris, he missed out 14 days for contact tracing, came back for one practice, then got pulled again the next day. And he missed 28 days.
Wow.
And never had COVID. So there lies the frustration for Jeremy Pruitt. Everybody's, dealing with this, and I think that, across college football, it's something you see every week. This team had to postpone. That team had to postpone. This person's suspended activities. But for Coach Pruitt, he's been really transparent through it all until he looked around and said, well, nobody else is being transparent, so what good does this do me? So now it's, hey, guys, we're not going to tell you if our number's 0 or if our number's 44. We're not going to tell you because it doesn't help us to tell you. We've been trying to be, transparent with you guys, and it did us no good, but ended up on the bottom line of ESPN that we had to miss a scrimmage because we had so-and-so number of kids out for contact tracing. So, that I think he's kind of changed his tune a little bit with how he's handling it, and so thus Tennessee's not going to release a number. Yeah,
no doubt. Big storyline across college football. Will Muschamp, same thing during his most recent media availability. Austin mentioned that, I think, Wes, correct me if I'm wrong, I had a couple guys on the team that had to miss 28 days, I think, most of preseason camp because of contact tracing. Didn't
and in most instances, nobody had it.
Right, exactly. So it's been a difficult thing to navigate for everyone. Let's move on to another question, sort of burning question I got for you, and that is, we feel like we know some of the strengths of both these teams, right? But in your mind, what is the biggest strength of this Vols team? It can be any phase of the game, any side of the ball, and then what's the area where maybe you have the most question marks, or an area that you sort of feel like is vulnerable that could play into South Carolina's hands and vice versa?
Well, I think experience and continuity. Continuity with the fact that Tennessee's got the same coordinators back-to-back years. You look across the league, that's not always the case. Obviously, South Carolina's breaking in, Coach Bobo, who has called plays for years and years and years. But, I watched a quarterback battle in 2005 take place, and the team was divided. And then when things didn't go the right way, then it divided the team even further. Obviously, Helinski and Colin Hill have had a quarterback battle in fall camp, and only you guys could tell me whether it was close or what. But either way, they made their man, and it's Coach Bobo's guy from Colorado State. And so, I think the continuity of having the same coordinators helps Tennessee. I think the experience at quarterback, even though JG's been Jekyll and Hyde at times, I think that helps Tennessee. Tennessee's got a lot of experience on the offensive line. Their biggest question marks, to me, are at the defensive line and edge pass rusher. Can Tennessee get to Colin Hill on Saturday? Can they get in his face and make him really have to think on split second, or is he going to have all day to throw? Because I think if they set him back there and give him time to throw, he's going to have a nice night. So I think that's the biggest question mark, is can Tennessee get home without having to bring the kitchen sink?
Wes, you got anything else?
Yeah, I've been reading y'all's stuff on VolQuest. Obviously, if you're a Carolina fan listening to this and want to sort of read up on the matchup from that perspective, Go check them out. They do a great job. And, you just mentioned the defensive line is sort of the edge rushers. Is that an area that Austin was expected to be a little bit of a question mark coming into the year, or has that been more of a surprise as camp has gone along and as the coaches have talked about areas of concern that has kind of just stood out? I did see, I think y'all had reported a fair amount of Tennessee's pressure last year was from, bringing extra guys, bringing blitzers as opposed to getting there with the front four. So has that sort of been a little bit of a surprise, or was that sort of just what y'all thought coming in?
Well, I think that, last year they were able to get home with Darrell Taylor, and he was coming off the edge. Kayvon Bennett really kind of burst onto the scene last year and did so because, again, when you've got a really kind of an alpha guy on the other side, you're not going to draw the double teams that guy draws. So, yes and no. Tennessee did bring pressure last year, but they were still able to get home with their edge guys. This year, you're hoping that Kayvon Bennett, can be Batman, and you're hoping that, some other guys, whether it be Roman Harrison or a DeAndre Johnson or some younger guys like a Morvin Joseph or Tyler Barron can figure it out quickly and ascend into being someone who can help you, more and more as the season goes along.
Austin, last thing for you, man, and we'll let you run. We know you got a busy schedule. Biggest key to this game, what Tennessee wins if this happens, South Carolina wins if this happened. What's the biggest one or two keys to this game to determine the outcome in your mind?
I think for Tennessee, they've got to get off to a good start and not turn the football over. If they can get off to a clean start, be able to score some points in the first half and not turn it over, I think they got a shot to go into Columbia and win. I think any road team is going to have a much better shot than they normally do, just because of the fact that it's not really it's a home game, but it's not a true home game. So, and that goes for any team coming to Neyland Stadium this year. And then as far as South Carolina, if you're South Carolina, you don't force JG into some early bad decisions and hope the doubt creeps in, here's same old JG, and see where things go from there.
Good deal. All right, that's Austin Price from VolQuest.com. Thanks a lot for joining us, man. We really appreciate your time, and keep doing the good work over at VolQuest.com.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Austin. Appreciate you.
All right, Austin. See you, bud.